Welcome into the Rocc Pod, presented by the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. I am John Gay from Jag and Detroit Podcasts.
I am Lisa Bibby, your neighborhood realtor with Keller Williams Advantage.
And I'm Trish Caruth, third-generation jeweler and owner of Your Personal Jeweler.
Today we're joined by Carolyn Elliot of HR Pro, based right here in Royal Oak. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you, everybody. I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about HR Pro, and you've got a great history in Royal Oak, right?
We sure do. We call Royal Oak home, and we're happy to be here. Christopher Powell is our CEO, and he started the company in 1990. And at that time, we actually were on Woodward. So we've made some transitions across the city, moving to our Washington Square Plaza, and then our 11-mile road location, which many people ask me about when I see them. But our current home is on Campbell. So we have been there since 2019, and we love it. We're right next to WOW.
Nice. I'm actually in Washington Square Plaza.
Past neighbors and a past lives.
Can you tell us about the work that you do with employers?
Again, founded in 1990, but we really started kind of in the Ben admin area as a Ben advisory. And so if people are familiar, our sister company is Benapro. We have Benapro and HR Pro. And so we really started in that space, and our CEO saw that continuing need of business evolve with really kind of supporting the administrative function for companies and different employers. And so that's where the COBRA, the FSA kind of came to be. And since that time, we've expanded to HRIS, payroll administration. And then in about 2015, after an acquisition, we really engaged the HR consulting arm, which is the team that I'm involved with as the director of HR advisory solutions.
Got it. Carolyn, can you talk a little bit more about what you do in the HR consulting space?
So HR consulting gives us an opportunity to connect with clients in a couple of different ways. We can support clients with more project-based items, employee handbooks, FLSA reviews, I-9 audits, all the alphabet soup. Our HR support for an existing team can also be beneficial for employers. So if they have an HR manager in place, we can come in and provide coaching, additional support, really just kind of digging into some more problem solving. And then lastly, we also can be the HR team for companies. So currently right now I have a few clients where I am their sole HR person. And so that allows me to really kind of connect with employees one-on-one and then support their manager teams and their executive leadership as needed. So that's also a great solution that we have in place.
So Carolyn, talking about connecting, give us your 3 favorite things about HR.
I love many things about HR. I will try to narrow them to 3. The first being HR is constantly evolving and constantly changing, and I love that. It can be difficult to manage when you have legislative changes happening all the time, but that's truly what makes it exciting because it's quite the opposite of stagnant. You know, when you are constantly evolving and changing in the space, it gives you an opportunity to also grow, I think, personally and professionally. So that would be number 1. Constant change is our friend, even if we don't want it. Number 2 would be that it's always relevant. I feel like if you listen to any stories on social media, the news, family discussions, it all ties back to HR and policies and practices in place with employers, wage discussions, union discussion, DE&I discussions. It all comes back to the workplace, and HR typically and should be at the center of those conversations. So I love that HR has really kind of fought to have a seat at that table. And so that's important. And then lastly, I would say that it is fascinating in all of its forms. My background is I have a BA in psychology from Michigan State, so go green. I also have my MSW from Wayne State. So watching human behavior in moments where it can be very stressful and tense and also very rewarding is just fascinating to me. So I love being able to, again, connect with people and really hopefully support them when they are enduring high stress volumes, but I love being a part of it.
I can't think of 2 better degrees for somebody in the HR world to have. That's perfect. So Carolyn, we've seen so many changes in the last few years, all throughout COVID, but let me narrow it down a little bit. What unique challenges have employers been presented with in just the last 6 months, the first half of 2023?
So one of the biggest I would say is that exactly as you said, transitioning kind of out of COVID, if you will, we're still dealing with the repercussions. And I saw many clients of mine and across the board, employers, abroad, really restructuring and kind of stepping back and saying, how do we need to operate more effectively? And so unfortunately, that may come with terminations, layoffs, et cetera. And so that's where we've really been at the table with a few different clients that have had some significant downsizing. So that would be a big one. The second one that kind of ties in would really almost be this identity crisis that I see with my clients. So as a result of restructuring, whether that's been, acquisition and downsizing, acquisition and growth, I've seen it in both forms. It really is, who are we as a company? How are we operating going forward? What are our values? There's, can often be a lot of trust kind of lost in that process. And it's hard to, see employees go through that. And it's also hard to see leaders kind of have to experience that with their employees as well. And so I think overall, there's kind of this moment right now where companies are reassessing just the who are we question, looking in the mirror and really kind of taking some time to do that. And if they're not, I would definitely recommend that they do.
Quick follow-up on that, Carolyn. So on this very podcast, we have had people on both sides of the equation talking about remote work and hybrid work. And folks say that, this is the way of the world. People are going to want to work remotely. If you want to find great candidates, you're going to be willing to have your employees work remotely. And then we've had other people on the podcast as guests. They're more of the old school mentality of you need to have that face-to-face, in-person interaction with your coworkers by the water cooler every day. I'm curious where you fall in the spectrum between those two extremes.
Absolutely. I would say we're middle of the road. At HR Pro ourselves, we continue with a hybrid working arrangement. And so that allows for people to be in the office 3 days a week and then remote 2 days a week. We have a core day, which is Wednesdays. And so that allows for us to collaborate effectively as a team. We kind of know, we'll all be together in this day. We can do a meeting. I've seen it play out. I think it's going to come back to a couple main points. One, it has to make sense for your business. If people were able to work remotely for however long during the pandemic and were able to get their jobs done effectively, it's going to be very difficult convincing them otherwise. Number two, there may be times where you need to meet face to face. And so keeping that door open is really important to make sure that you're not losing any collaborative energy. There is something about being face to face when you're trying to work through problems together as a team. So I would say, lastly, just keeping in mind what makes sense for your business, but what makes sense for your employees. If your employees are really strongly voicing a need to remain remote, I would listen to them and hear the conversation. Why is it? What is actually drawing you to that space where you don't want to come into the office? If it's long commutes, that's a huge consideration. With high costs of gas and food and everything else, that's a way that maybe we're not paying you higher and we're not increasing your wages right now, but we're going to help you save on gas costs. I mean, that's just a way to kind of think creatively through the problem. So people really need to just make it make sense for their business and for their people.
Well, I love thinking creatively. And speaking of creative thinking, what advice do you have for listeners navigating complex HR challenges?
Absolutely. They can get very complex in the HR space. So a couple things I would say is it really is never too late to get your foundation set up, whether that's having an employee handbook that's up to date or doing an FLSA audit to see your non-exempt and exempt workers, or doing an I-9 review. These are essential compliance items in the HR space and in the employer world where you really want to make sure you have a sound foundation set up. It ultimately will help you save time on the back end too. So it may feel like a heavy lift up front, but it's really important to help set you up for success moving forward. I would also say, as I just mentioned, you really have to know your people. So whether you use a DISC assessment, or I love to talk about the love languages, but in the workplace, how does your team respond and react to praise? Do they like getting little gifts? Do they like having a shout out in the team meeting? All these things are so essential to operating effectively and managing your teams effectively. And it just helps when conflict arises, which it will, to be able to work through that together from a place really of, mutual respect and having a core foundation and a core relationship. And then lastly, obviously I'm in this space, but I have to put a plug out for engaging outside vendors and outside support to help you navigate, whether that's really from a employment, a legal team, or you're utilizing someone like HR Pro from an HR advisory standpoint, where you're able to work through problems and get potentially new recommendations from an objective viewpoint. It's so important to have that lens because the day-to-day can really kind of muddy the waters. And so bringing somebody in from the outside can help you sort through issues that you may not even realize are happening.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Earlier, you talked a little bit about the different unique challenges that employers have faced. And I know that you have a psychology degree. So when it comes to things like downsizing, where there's an emotional side, you become a family and a business, but there's also the logical side where you know that you need to downsize. How do you help employees kind of merge the two?
I think that's a great question. And it's an important question, again, that all employers should kind of understand and have at the ready, which is truly coming back to transparency and communication. So employees are not going to necessarily know your bottom line and all your ins and outs on your books, nor should they. That's not their role within the company. But they should understand where the business is at financially from a growth perspective, from a, are we operating more lean these days? What that looks like. And that really comes back to transparency and communication. Oftentimes we say, if you're being terminated or let go or a layoff, it really should not be a surprise. That's something that if you can, to really minimize that is important because then people understand and anticipate that it's coming. I know that we lost out on these projects or these contracts ended the beginning of this year. And so that allows, me to kind of move forward knowing that this isn't personal. This is really about the business or about the operational needs.
I think that's a really key component is by putting logic to it, you can maybe take a piece of the emotion away.
Absolutely.
So you obviously have quite a passion for HR and all things HR, Carolyn, but let me ask you what you do when you're not working.
When I'm not working, I am helping raise my 11-month-old who is now walking. So luckily I have a wonderful, supportive husband who keeps me sane and helps me be the best mom I can be. But HR Pro has been really, Chris, our CEO, prides himself in having, I think it's 32 babies have been born, within the company since it started. And he's really kind of just like a grandpa in that sense of it really allowing working moms specifically to just be engaged in the workplace and working parents at large. We have mostly women in our company and have kind of historically. And so that is such an important piece to all of this of having a supportive family and core and also supportive employer to help me get through that. But we are looking forward to sunny days and swimming and walking and doing all the outdoor things. I am a Royal Oak native, so we just hit the Royal Oak Farmers Market on Saturday and got some hummingbird plants, so that was cool. And our 2 giant old man pit bulls are always by our side, so that's kind of a little bit of our lives.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, I'm going to ask you to pull today's fishbowl question of the day, where we ask you, Carolyn, a totally random question. So, Lisa, would you please draw our fishbowl question of the day?
All right, Carolyn, get ready. Okay, what is the one thing still on your bucket list that you're going to achieve this year?
Ooh, this year, that's a tough one. Ooh.
She's got a 1-year-old,
I
Lisa.
know. That's why I was just like, oh, man, if I had this question like 2 years ago, it would be different. I mean, travel is always big. But personally, I just was thinking about this again of I really want to learn sign language. It has been such, in the last couple of years, I just think it is so incredible to be able to communicate without words. And I think it's so important to connect with people who maybe often feel like they are not able to connect with others. And so that is a huge bucket list, and I'm really hoping I will make it happen.
And that's a really great skill for children.
Yes.
And I've heard many stories of the young ones learning sign language long before they learn to speak.
Absolutely. We do it. We've been doing our more and eat and everything. Whether or not she gets it, she's probably like, you're crazy. But It's definitely a passion. I really, really want to commit to it. So
in third grade, me and my best friend got split up in class. So we learned the alphabet and sign language, and we would communicate across the room.
So great.
That's amazing.
Who needs note passing? You can just, you guys like really evolved.
And if you were in school now, Trish, there'd probably be an app for it.
Yeah,
Right?
Chat GPT and everything else. Yeah.
Exactly.
Talk to my friend.
Well, I really like what you said there, Carolyn, about inclusivity and people who that may be differently able. Like the same is true in podcasting, where we make sure there's a transcript available of every episode of the Rocc Pod, because somebody who might be hard of hearing can still get the content. It's very important in the podcasting space to have transcripts of episodes.
Yes.
So just being more inclusive of everybody all around us really seems like it's a big thing. You mentioned DEI earlier, diversity, equity, inclusion, for anybody who doesn't know the acronym. It's really a huge thing right now.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something, just to tie into some of our other questions, it's such an important thing. It was not just a hot topic. It still will exist now and forever. And, you know, employers have a lot of opportunity to assess how they're doing that. And same thing of hard of hearing or potentially disabled in some way or another, looking at your job applications, how you have your job postings, where you're able to apply online, if that's an opportunity. I mean, all those things come into play. Having inclusive language in your job postings is huge. And so even just before you even get somebody on the table and a board and actually an active employee, that's a huge thing right now, is making sure that you have inclusive language in your job postings and your job descriptions. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's very, very important. And we're happy to see it stay.
Last question before we wrap up, because this just popped into my head since you were mentioning it, is I was reading that we all have our implicit biases. Subconsciously, we tend to want to hire people that look or act or think like us. But all the research out there shows that the more diverse a group of opinions and perspectives you can have in a room, the more effective a team you can be. Is that right?
Period. That's it. I mean, every time that you look at a team that's able to bring in, and it's diversity in all of its forms, life experience, you know, education, background, skill, it can be across. It's, if you've seen the iceberg diagram, kind of what you see and what's below. I mean, diversity can mean so many things, and having a diverse team at the table makes your product better, makes your business grow. It's all those items, because you're just bringing so many different brains together to really create a beautiful thing. And you know, businesses will have and will continue to have a great opportunity to do that. I was in a recent diversity summit, and one of the speakers had said, you know, diversity hires are not token hires. And I've unfortunately heard that used kind of casually in the HR space. And that's something just to be so aware of right now, that it's really not about checking the box and all the things that people kind of in their humorous ways like to use. It truly is about engaging people in a way that can fit within and grow your culture, because maybe you're operating in this space, but maybe you want to grow and expand. And that's a great way to do it. So I encourage employers to really kind of think through that. And that again comes in, what questions are you asking, you know, on your during your interviews? People love to do the, well, that's where I golf. Is that where you golf? And it's not everyone golfs. But it's human nature to try to find commonality. That's a beautiful thing, but that also can limit your ability to connect with potential applicants and potential new hires. It could be a great asset to your business.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn, for coming on our show today. Can you tell the listeners how they can find you?
Absolutely. It was great speaking with all of you today. You can check out our website at www.hrpro.com. We're also on LinkedIn and other social media, so come find us. And if you're ever at WOW on Campbell, stop by. We're right next door.
My name is Lisa Bibby. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Advantage. I put the real back in realtor. Unsure of how the market is shifting and thinking of selling this year? Give me a call for a free consultation. My website is soldbylisa.com. You can also find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Sold by Lisa B.
I'm Trish Carruth, third-generation jeweler and owner of Your Personal Jeweler. I specialize in creating custom engagement rings, wedding rings, and fine jewelry. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Personal Jeweler, our website, www.thepersonaljeweler.com, or stop by our storefront on 4th and Washington.
I'm John Gay from Jag in Detroit Podcast. If you have any questions at all about the world of podcasting, which continues to explode post-COVID here in 2023, I'm happy to answer any question you have. You can find me at jagindetroit.com or on social media at jagindetroit, or you can call me 313-757-2JAG. That comes up to 2524. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Rocc Pod, presented for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. For more information about the chamber itself and to get involved, you can visit royaloakchamber.com. Thanks, everyone.